Now the President of the United States.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for allowing me back in the state. It is very gracious of the people of New Mexico to not only let in a Texan, but to let in somebody from Arizona as well. And from California, I might add. Listen, thanks, Pete. I appreciate your leadership. Pete, as you know, is a class act. He is he loves New Mexico, and he loves our country. We spent a lot of time talking about energy this morning. He and I are deeply concerned about the price of gasoline. We are worried about the trends taking place. We understand that we need to work with Congress to get a bill out that will encourage conservation, encourage alternative sources of energy, encourage research and development to help us use energy in wiser ways, a bill to modernize the electricity grid, a bill to encourage environmentally friendly exploration, all aimed at making America more economically secure and less dependent on foreign sources of energy. And I want to thank you for your leadership, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks for your leadership on the issue. I'm proud to be here with John McCain. We traveled yesterday in Arizona and then Colorado and here in New Mexico. He's fixing to go back home, as am I, to Texas. But the reason why I'm so pleased that John came, and we'll talk to him in a minute, is because he, like Pete, understands now's the time to get something done on the big issue of Social Security. I'm also pleased he's here because John has been one of the true stalwarts in understanding what I call the freedom agenda. For the youngsters here, I want you to understand that you're now living in an historic time. Freedom is changing the world. We acted to secure our country. We acted to secure our country, upheld doctrine, by upholding doctrine. And we said to the Taliban, if you harbor a terrorist, you're equally as guilty as a terrorist. We moved to uphold the doctrine and protect America. But in so doing, we liberated millions of people from the clutches of a barbaric regime, and millions of people in Afghanistan went to the polls to vote for their leadership for the first time in 5,000 years. I believe there will be a democracy in the Palestinian territories, and that's essential to achieve the peace with our friend and ally Israel. I was inspired by the elections in the Ukraine. I've been very inspired by the courage of the Iraqi citizens who, in the face of terrorist threats, said, we're going to be free, and they went to the polls. These are important events because free societies will be peaceful societies. As freedom spreads, the world becomes more peaceful. And I believe we're now laying the foundations for peace to come for a generation of Americans that are growing up now. And that's an important legacy. I want to thank those who have worn our uniform. I want to thank those who are wearing the uniform. I want to thank the family members who support those who wear the uniform. I want to thank the members of the Congress who clearly see the vision of a peaceful world. I appreciate the Young at Heart Choir for joining us. We should have gotten here earlier. But Pete and I went over to a retirement center, and we wanted to say hello to the folks there. My message to them was, just like my message is going to be several times today, if you're getting a Social Security check, you're going to keep getting your check. I don't care what they're telling you. I don't care what the fine print and the political ads say. You will get your check. The government is going to keep its promise. So you may hear me say that a couple of times today because I know how important that is for the people who are getting a Social Security check to hear that message. I also want to tell you that Laura sends her best. I spoke to her this morning. She is... I said, how's everything at the ranch? She said, Barney is doing fine. I'm looking forward to spending Easter in Texas. It's a joy to get out of the nation's capital. I love my job. But I also like to get out amongst the people. I like to get home. I like to remember to go back to my roots where I was from. But I also like to come to places like Albuquerque because I believe that it's important for those of us in elected office to tell the people what's on our mind, to explain issues. Now, let me start off on Social Security by telling you, I believe the president's job and I believe senators' jobs are to confront problems, not to pass them on to future presidents and future Congresses. I believe that is why we get elected in the first place. We have a problem in Social Security. Franklin Roosevelt did a good thing when he created the Social Security system, and it has worked for a lot of folks. Social Security has provided an important safety net for many, many senior citizens. But what I want to explain to you, and I think others will here as well, is that times have changed. The math has changed on Social Security. In other words, let me put it to you this way. There's a lot of people getting ready to retire called baby boomers. I'm one. I was born in 1946. My retirement age, I reached retirement age in 2008. It turns out to be a convenient moment. So, a lot of people like me starting to retire in 2008. There is a bulge, baby boomer bulge, a lot of us. Interestingly enough, we are now living longer than previous generations. When Social Security was first started, life expectancy was a heck of a lot lower than it is today. Plus, many politicians in previous years ran for office saying, vote for me, I will increase your Social Security benefits. In other words, I'll increase the promises. So my generation has been promised more benefits than the previous generation. A lot of us living longer, getting paid more money, with fewer people paying into the system. That's the other side of the equation. This chart, for example, shows in the 1950s there were 16 workers for every beneficiary. In other words, the load was pretty light. Today it's 3.3 to 1 workers. In other words, 3.3 workers to every beneficiary. And you got a lot of us living longer, getting greater benefits with fewer people paying the load. See? And pretty soon it's going to be 2 to 1. And so you can imagine longer life with greater beneficiaries. In other words, the obligations are increasing quite dramatically with fewer people carrying the load. And guess who gets to carry the load? The young workers. And the fundamental question, this isn't an issue, frankly, about the older generation. You're going to get your check. You're in good shape. It's really an issue of whether or not this government and this country understands the burden we're going to place on young Americans coming up. That's what the issue is all about. And here is the burden. This is a pay-as-you-go system. Money goes in and it goes out. Now, some probably think, well, there's a trust. In other words, we're taking your money and we'll hold it for you. And then when you retire, we give it back to you. That's not how it works. It's pay-as-you-go. The money comes in and we go ahead and pay. We pay for a lot of things other than Social Security. The retirement checks are sent out, and if there's money left over, it goes to fund all aspects of government, and what is left behind is a piece of paper, an IOU. In 2018, because the math has changed, more money will be going out than coming in for Social Security. People will be paying payroll taxes, but because baby boomers like me are retired, and we're living longer, and we get bigger benefits than the previous generation, the system turns into the red, and every year thereafter, if we don't do anything, it gets worse and worse and worse. To give you a sense of how big the problem will be for a younger generation and younger workers, in 2027, we'll be $200 billion in the hole. That's $200 billion more than coming in for payroll taxes. It'll be bigger in 2028, 2029, and in the 2030s, it gets up to $300 billion. So you're getting a sense of the magnitude of the problems. Unlike the old days when 16 workers would pay into the system for every beneficiary, it was a manageable issue. The math worked. The math doesn't work now. And that's why I went in front of the Congress and said, folks, we got to do something now before it's too late. The experts will tell you the longer we wait, the harder it is to get the problem solved. So that's why I'm traveling the country. I'm saying two things right off the bat. One, we have got a serious problem for younger generation. And two, if you're getting your check, if you're born prior to 1950, the government is going to keep its promise to you. Nothing changes. Now, at my State of the Union, I said to the Congress, I'm willing to listen to any good idea. I said, bring your ideas forward, please. In order to solve this problem, it's not going to be a Republican idea or a Democrat idea. It's going to be American idea brought forth by both either Republicans or Democrats or both. That's what needs to be done on this issue. That's what we got to do to fix it permanently. I'm confident John will talk about the spirit of the 1983 agreement. But let me just tell you right quick, in 1983, President Reagan, Tip O'Neill, and others came together and said, hey, we got a problem. Let's fix it. It was a 75-year fix. But nevertheless, it was a very positive spirit that got people to the table. Problem with the 75-year fix is here we are in 2005. It's 22 years after 1983. It's not exactly 75 years. The reason I bring that point up is when you hear him talking about a 75-year fix in Washington, the math doesn't work. If we're going to fix it, let's fix it forever, is what I'm saying to members of Congress. Let's come to the table. All ideas are on the table. And let's get this problem solved once and for all. Now, I've got an idea that I think the American people ought to seriously consider, and that is younger workers ought to be allowed to set aside some of their own money in a personal savings account as a part of the Social Security system. Not the way to fix the system. It's going to require other matters to fix the system, but as a way to make the system better for the individual worker. Let me tell you why I like the idea, and then we'll get to our panelists. First, I like voluntary ideas. In other words, I said, if you so choose, you should have the option. Government's not going to say you must do this, but if this is an appealing idea for you, that you ought to be allowed to take some of your own money and set it aside in a personal savings account that you'll own yourself. Secondly, the rate of return in a conservative mix, notice I say conservative mix, of bonds and stocks is greater than that which the government earns with your money. And that rate of return, the bigger rate of return, is important. Because over time, if you hold it, your money grows. See? And it's that growth, that compounding rate of interest, that'll make the system better for the individual worker. Let me just give you an idea. If you're earning $35,000 over your lifetime, and say that the system says you can take a third of your payroll taxes and put it in a personal account, and in a conservative mix of bonds and stocks, that will yield you over your lifetime, when you get ready to retire, $250,000. See? And the way the system would work is that $250,000 is yours. You live off the interest off the $250 plus that which the government can afford to pay you. Now, another benefit of having your own personal account is that it's yours. It's real. It's not an IOU from one part of government to the other like the current system does. It's your asset. It's something you own. And I like the idea of encouraging ownership throughout all walks of life. You can leave it to whomever you want. You see, it'll help you in your retirement. You can't liquidate the plan upon retirement because it's a part of the retirement system. But your estate, you can leave it to whomever you want. You want to leave it to your daughter? Fine, leave it to you. If you want to leave it to Colin, your son, leave it to your son. And then that person can use it for whatever he or she chooses. Thirdly, this is fair for families. The way the current system works today, if you got two folks working in the family, they're both contributing to Social Security. The husband or wife dies young. The spouse gets either the survivor benefits or his or her own Social Security check, which is ever higher, but not both. See what I'm saying? I'm saying both contribute to the system, but if only one is living, there's a lot of folks die young, unfortunately, in America. That means that the spouse is only going to get the benefits of one person's contributions, not both. That doesn't seem fair to me. If somebody's worked all their life or 30 years of their life and dies early, it seems like that contribution ought to be worth something to the family. And that's what a personal account will do. It'll allow you to earn some money. It grows over time, and if you pass away early, it's an asset you can pass on to help your widow or your children get an education. A couple of other points, and Laura always tells me, make sure I don't talk too much. Sometimes I listen, sometimes I don't. Anyway, be happy to hear I listened today. A couple of other points I want to make to you. First of all, you notice I've been saying a conservative mix of bonds and stocks. In other words, you can't take your money and put it in the lottery. You can't take it to the track. There's a way that you invest that'll get you a good rate of return without obviously risking your retirement. And you know why I speak confidently about this subject on being able to have a rational plan for people to be able to get a better rate of return in? Because this isn't a new idea. It's a new idea to apply it to Social Security, but it's an old idea. The Federal Employee Thrift Savings Plan allows for federal employees to do just what I'm describing to you. Take some of their own money, set it aside, so their money grows faster. My attitude is pretty clear on this one. It's that if Congress thinks it's good enough for the federal employees, including themselves, sure seems good enough for the average worker in America. And so I'm talking about these ideas as a way to make the system work better for an individual worker, as a mix, as a part of an overall solution, permanent solution, because I believe all ideas ought to be on the table. And I think the American people want all ideas on the table. I think the American people expect members of both political parties to come and negotiate in good faith with all ideas on the table in order to solve this issue permanently. Joining us today is a really interesting soul named Fidel Vargas. Fidel is from the great state of California. Fidel is a person I got to know because, interestingly enough, in 2001, I anticipated that I actually campaigned on the issue, so it wasn't much of an anticipation on my part. I was following through on what I said I would do and take a serious look at solving the Social Security solvency issue, and I put together a bipartisan commission, of which Fidel was one. Fidel, you were a Republican or Democrat on that commission?
I'm a Democrat.
Welcome. Welcome. Tell you something interesting about Fidel. He was el alcalde. He was the mayor of a city in California at what age?
23.
Yeah, the guy peaked a little early, didn't he, you know? Anyway, Fidel, welcome. Thanks. Tell us about your experiences on the board, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, Mr. President. And I think one story that I can tell about why I'd make the trip from California here as a Democrat was something that you said to us, and I don't know if you remember this, but when we were appointed, we went to the White House, and this was May of 2001. This was before 9/11. And obviously after that tragic incident, a lot of us on the commission didn't know what was going to happen with the panel. And you brought us back, I think, in November. And one thing that stuck with me that you said that's made me even more committed to seeing something done with this issue, you said that reforming Social Security now was more important than ever because for America to be strong, the idea of everyone having ownership, all citizens, rich or poor, was important. And I know that people in my community where I live, in Baldwin Park, are those people. They're hardworking Americans making minimum wage that putting something aside for them in a personal account will make a huge difference for them and for their families. So again, I want to thank you for inviting me here to be with you. And just to give a background, again, I said I was a Democrat. I thought being from California was going to be bad, but
a lot of Democrats out here. People are interested in this issue.
No, that's good. That's good. Because I am a Democrat, and as I was telling the president, I'm a progressive Democrat, and a big fan of FDR and a big fan of people like Senator Moynihan, who I served with on the commission. And yet I realize that this is an issue that has to be addressed by all. My father just retired. He was a union carpenter, and I have to say the union carpenters have a very nice pension plan, and it's supplemented by Social Security. And he realizes, just as I do, that if we don't do something now, my kids, two youngest, Nicholas and Julian, who are here, 12 and 10, are going to, they're going to be in a tough spot. I was fortunate to serve on your commission, Mr. President. I also served on President Clinton's Social Security Advisory Council. And there were 4 things that both of those commissions, I think, had a consensus on, and I think it's important for everyone to realize that, Democrats and Republicans. The first was that we need to fix it now. I know that, you know, like you said, there's people that have different agendas on both sides of the aisle, but the experts, and neither Democrat or Republican, very clearly, as you pointed out, Mr. President, in 2018, there's less money coming in than going out. And those IOUs that you mentioned, you know, what people don't realize is those IOUs are going to be taken out of the safe at the Social Security Administration and walked over to the Treasury Department, and the Treasury Department's going to tell them we don't have any money. And then they're going to knock on the door of, well, maybe you'll still be there, Mr. McCain and Senator Domenici, and they're going to knock on your door and say, we have a problem. We need to come up with some money to pay current retirees. And if we wait until then, the problem is just enormous, and that's one of the things that we recognize, because at that point, again, the same options are going to be there. They're either going to have to borrow, raise taxes, some estimates up to 20%, have a payroll tax of 20%, which...
Think about that, a payroll tax of 20%. If you're a young worker, a young American, you better be listening to the problem. The problem is you'll be saddled with a 20% payroll tax. That's not going to work. That'd be terrible for the economy. Be terrible for your pocketbook. Sorry.
Right. And
got my attention.
No, yeah, absolutely. It got my attention too when I heard that. And or cut benefits for future generations. And so the longer we wait, the longer the problem. And I think that was the consensus, both on President Clinton's commission that I served on and on yours, that we need to fix it now. Secondly, that personal accounts and investing in the stock market was something that was going to help to supplement fixing the problem of Social Security, but more importantly, the idea of giving people ownership. And that it wasn't just something that, for me, this was important because I grew up in a working class family, and the idea of people having ownership, having a statement that says something is theirs, is absolutely critical, because that's something that they can talk about and share with and educate their kids and pass it on from generation to generation. And there's no reason that limitations on someone's education or their experience should keep them from doing that. And I think we all, Democrats and Republicans on those commissions, agree. Third, and this was something that I, as a progressive Democrat, fought hard for to make sure that the commissions included, was that we weren't going to touch the safety net. And you haven't talked about that at all, Mr. President. You want to maintain a safety net for all Americans so that no one has to be destitute if they've worked and paid into the system. And that was something that was very clear. So the idea that current retirees were not going to be affected, near retirees were not going to be affected, those were priorities on the commission.
Let me say one thing on that, sorry. There's a guy named Posen on the commission who's come up with some interesting ideas to make the system progressive for future retirees. And we accept that concept. It makes a lot of sense. In other words, there's ways to design the system to be fair to people who are particularly at the low income scale. And I appreciate your work on that. I know you had a lot to do with that. And it's an idea that a lot of people in Congress are taking a serious look at. And we welcome that idea.
Right. And then finally, again, just reiterating the point I made earlier, just the point was leave current retirees alone. And I have to say, as a Democrat, it is frustrating because on most issues, I agree with my fellow Democrats, but the idea of trying to scare people into believing that something's going to happen to your check if you're in retirement now because we're talking about fixing Social Security, or if you're nearing retirement, is frankly just false. It's a false statement. And again, I think it's important for, and we recognize this on the commission, there was 8 Democrats and 8 Republicans. And I'll end with this point. Senator Moynihan, who is one of my heroes, is probably one of the greatest U.S. senators in history, Democrat or Republican. He happened to be a Democrat. And his final public service to our country was serving on this commission. And I know how passionate he was about this. And a lot of people said he crossed the aisle, but he didn't. He was a Democrat to the core and believed that in order for us to continue to have a strong country and a strong Social Security system, that we needed to do something now. So in that spirit, I am honored to be here and glad that you're continuing to move forward. And I encourage our senators here on the stage and my senators in California to join you in fixing this now. Thank you.
Yeah, Fidel, thanks. What a wonderful contribution that you made individually, that the commission made to this debate. There's some ideas that they put on the table that will help permanently solve the issue. But as importantly, they sent a clear example of how people should work together. Again, I repeat to you, this is going to require a focused effort by people, leaders on both sides of the aisle, to come together with good ideas, to do what the people expect us to do. Somebody who understands that clearly besides Pete Domenici is John McCain. I appreciate you coming, Senator.
Thank you very much,
Glad
Mr.
to
President.
you came back. Yeah.
Thank you, and thank you for
Good job, Fidel. Thank you.
this time I've been able to spend with you on this very important issue. And by the way, I like his tie today, don't you? Thank you, Mr.
Part of the
President.
Social Security uniform, yeah.
I'm very happy to be back in my neighboring state of New Mexico. My respect and admiration and affection for Pete Domenici is limitless. I know, and you know, he works tirelessly, and there's no one more respected in the United States Senate. I've learned a lot from him, and I also, by the way, I note in the audience my old and dear friend Manuel Lujan. It's nice to see you again, Manuel. The president and I were we're over in Tucson, and then where there's a lot of airplanes, old airplanes, and we were up in Denver at the Air Museum there, and we saw the airplane that the president flew honorably in his service in the National Guard, and we saw several, and we saw several that I have crashed, and so I want to, before we get into Social Security very quickly, I want to say to you that I cannot tell you the pride that I feel in this president and the vision that he articulated in his inaugural address and what is happening throughout the world in the spread of freedom and democracy that is remarkable, unparalleled, historical, and thanks to the example of the United States of America. My friends, I travel around the world a lot, usually at your expense, and recently I travel pretty well. Anyway, I was recently in Afghanistan and Iraq. Afghanistan, a country where women, if they showed their ankle under the Taliban, were taken into the soccer stadium in Kabul and hung from the goalpost, are now an integral part of the government. They're receiving education. Millions of them have voted. Some remarkable change. As the president said, 5,000 years this country is now finally experiencing democracy and freedom. In Iraq, a free and fair election was held. Many of us will never forget the image of the young man who put his arms around a suicide bomber and sacrificed his own life so that his fellow citizens could exercise the most precious right that democracies have, and that is to vote. It's remarkable. And my friends, you're going to hear a lot in the future about weapons of mass destruction, including next week. I've been to a mass grave outside Baghdad where there were 3,000 bodies. Saddam Hussein was very efficient. He used to take two people, tie them together, shoot one in the head, and throw them both in the grave. I've been to the prison where 1,000 8- and 9-year-old criminal boys were held, criminals were held by Saddam Hussein. America, the world, and Iraq is better off for what we did in bringing democracy and freedom to Iraq. And finally, I should stop now, but I would like to add, as the president said, The winds of change are blowing through the Middle East. It's remarkable what's happening. We're seeing peace have a chance with the Palestinians and the Israelis. We are seeing an incredible change, and the hinge of history is moving in a remarkable direction, and some of our European friends may be on the wrong side of history. This president and this administration is on the right side of history. My friends, the reason why we are here is right here on this chart. It's right here on this chart. You see the red. Anybody who tells you that Social Security is not safe has not seen these facts and figures. My friends, we call it a safety net, but you know what it really is? It's this nation was founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and that is we care for those who can't care for themselves. And that's what this is all about. And that's why we have this obligation. We entered into a solemn contract with working Americans a long time ago. We have to keep that contract. We can't keep that contract with this kind of numbers that you are seeing here today. I'd like to give a little straight talk here. One, working Americans will not see the same benefits that retired Americans are experiencing today under this present system. Fact. The other salient facts are that we must fix the issue sooner or later. The longer we wait, the more draconian the remedies will have to be. Some of our friends who are opposing this idea say, oh, you don't have to worry until 2042. We wait till 2042 when we stop paying people Social Security? That's not what this is all about. I want to say to our friends in AARP, and they are my friends in AARP, come to the table with us. We not only have an obligation to seniors, but we have an obligation to future generations of Americans as well. Personal savings accounts are an important link to the future. You know, the program that the President just referred to that we members of Congress and federal employees can engage in, can take part in, over the last 22 years, the return on that has been between 6 and 9%. The return on those investments in one of 5 different kinds of investments. Compare that with the 1.8% interest that contributions to the Social Security Trust funds have gained. So this is a link to the future. This is a way that next generations of Americans can have a much more comfortable retirement period because of this ability to invest their own money into personal savings accounts, retirement accounts, and that is a very important, I think, way that we can assure future generations of young Americans of a better retirement than the ones that retirees are experiencing today. Finally, the President referred to a moment that it's one of my earliest memories, and that was when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill stood together and said, we're going to save Social Security. As the President points out, it didn't save it for 75 years, but it was a bipartisan effort to do so. Some tough decisions were made, my friends. Retirement age was increased, taxes were increased, but we did what we needed to do. And how did we do it? We did it, Republicans and Democrats standing together. Please urge, please urge. Please urge our Democrat friends to come to the table and sit with us and do this for the greater good of the United States of America. I'll be glad to go to the floor, and so will Pete, and fight on partisan philosophical differences we have. We'll do it all day and all night. This issue shouldn't have anything to do with partisan politics. This is all got to do with an obligation that we entered into a long time ago that we have to keep. So the next time you talk to one of our, in fact, there's a Democrat senator from this state, I think, that we might want to make sure that we reach out to our Democratic colleagues and sit down and debate this and work this out, and we can. The good news is thanks to the President's efforts on this effort, on this issue, an overwhelming majority of Americans now see a major problem. Well, if the overwhelming majority of Americans see a major problem, then the overwhelming majority of elected members of Congress should sit down and work it out. Mr. President, this is a legacy that I think that with your leadership,
If I remember this issue, people saying, well, you better not talk about the issue. There'll be a bad political consequence. I believe there'll be a bad political consequence for people who are unwilling to sit down and talk about the issue. I think the American people expect people from both parties to stand up and take the lead and solve this issue for generations to come. That's what I believe. Speaking about generations and generations to come, we've got Margaret Valdez with us. Margaret, thanks. First, I want to thank you for being a school teacher.
I'm Margaret Valdez, as you said. I'm a retired school teacher. I get a retirement pension. I also get Social Security. I am 78 years of age.
No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
Social Security.
Where did you teach school?
I was a teacher in the Española school system. I was a science teacher and retired after 28 years of teaching.
Well, thanks for teaching. By the way, anybody out there want to serve the country, go ahead and be a teacher. It's a great way to serve the country. Anyway, you're getting a Social Security check.
I sure do.
And you need it.
Yeah, and I need it.
See, you got the reason why Margaret's point is an important point. We understand. I understand. John understands. Pete understands. A lot of people rely upon the check. It's an important part of their life. That's why none of us want to put a system in place that touches that check. It's essential that you hear that. Are you worried about getting your check, Margaret?
I am not worried at all.
Good.
I have assured my friends and people, in fact, Senator Domenici and I at one time were in the same stage, assuring the people that nothing was going to happen to your Social Security.
Well, you can rest assured your assurance is good.
Now, what I'm concerned with, it's not me as much, not at this stage of the game. What I'm concerned is about my grandchildren who will be going into professions and so forth, and I would like to see them saving some of their money into their own accounts. I'm very worried about my grandchildren, the little ones that I have. One of them flew in from Texas to be here today, and she's just a little girl, and when the time comes for her that she's an adult, she'll have to have something.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I agree. In other words, what Margaret's concern is, will the safety net that exists today for the seniors be around for a younger generation? It's really the issue. This is a generational issue, folks. It really is. The generation now receiving the checks can rest assured you're going to get your check. And what's going to end up happening is, once that assurance sinks in, your generation is going to start saying, what are you going to do about my grandkids? That's why it's a generational issue. Speaking about grandkids, you've invited one to join us, haven't you?
yes, I sure did. I have to introduce to you my oldest granddaughter, Jessica Valdez. And
Thank you for
she's
coming, Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Great grandmother you got here, right?
Yes, she's great.
That's good.
She's concerned about my future. I'm only 24 years old and a recent graduate from the University of New Mexico.
Congratulations. Very good. Proud of you.
I'm sorry.
I'm proud of you. That's great.
Thank you. I'm currently in the process of applying to medical school. So because I have not yet started my professional career, I have not yet started thinking about retirement, but I have been working since I was 16, and therefore paying into the system every 2 weeks, seeing it taken out of my check since I was 16.
So as you're aware of the fact that you're contributing to take care of the grandmom, and eventually pretty soon starting taking care of me and
Yes.
the baby boomers.
I am aware of that. I'm also aware that if the current system does not change, when I do become of age to retire, more than likely I will not have any money that I have paid into the system.
You know what's really interesting? It's the appropriate state to say this, Pete, that interesting survey one person, Jessica's age, told me about. It said, young Americans believe it's more likely they'll see a UFO than get a Social Security check. Kind of makes for an interesting dynamic, doesn't it, in the process?
Yes, it does.
See, if a lot of young Americans believe that, once they get assured that their grandparents are going to get their checks, the second question they'll ask, his first question is, will my grandmother get the check? The second question is, what are you going to do for me, Congress? What are you going to do to make sure that I don't have a huge burden when I'm coming? 20% payroll tax, perhaps? No benefits? UFO flying before checks fly? A lot of people your age starting to talk about this, Jessica, do you know?
Yes. Yes,
Good, I
they
hope
are.
so.
Now that education and everyone's becoming more aware that in a couple years it's not going to be there for us, we have started to realize, and because of that, it's one of the reasons I chose a more stable career and was looking at 401ks and stuff that I'll be able to have money when I'm old enough in case it's not there for us.
Yeah, 401k, it's an interesting thought. I don't remember talking about them when I was 24. Do you? No, which goes to show there's an investor culture beginning to grow in America. It's changing.
Yes, well, we need to save for ourselves in case it's not there for someone else to save for us.
Yeah, see, Fidel said something really interesting that caught my attention. You know, there is what's known as kind of the investor class. Kind of only certain people are investors in America. To me, that's a notion that's just not American, nor is something I agree with. I think all people should be encouraged to be investors. I think the more people that own something, as Fidel said, the better off our society will be. And that hadn't been the case in our society. The truth of the matter is, some segments of our society have not had asset bases to pass on from one generation to the next. And it's been a limiting part of the U.S. experience. So here we have a young lady talking about 401ks and willingness to invest and, want to manage my own money. Things are changing here, folks. And all we're saying in terms of considering an interesting idea is take what's happening in the society and applying it to the federal retirement system called Social Security. That's what we're talking about. Ray Zamora, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope that people get the picture. Grandmom worried about granddaughter. Granddaughter happy that grandmom's going to get the check, worried that she's going to see the check, or whether she can afford paying in the system. And that's the dynamic, and that's the issue that this country must confront head on. This isn't a political issue. This isn't, Democrats trying to get ahead of Republicans, Republicans trying to get ahead of Democrats. If that's the spirit in Washington, nothing's going to get done. But I can assure you, people on this stage are trying to get that spirit out of the system. We're trying to elevate this debate and focus on what's right for the American people. Ray Zamora's here. Small business owner.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Is that an accurate statement?
Small business owner.
Good, yeah. What's the name of it?
My name's Ray Zamora. I'm married, have 3 children. I own a local construction company, Anchor-Built. We currently employ 10 employees.
Good. What do you do?
We do mostly...
Build anchors?
It's really where the basis started was with my wife. It's a long story.
Okay.
As far as the name goes, play on words. And we do mainly institutional construction and commercial.
Good, good. Business all right?
Business is very good in Albuquerque. New Mexico's booming.
Good. You realize, I hope you realize, folks, that most new jobs are created by small business owners like Ray. Don't you like the idea of somebody sitting up here with the president and 2 senators saying, I own my own business? Go ahead.
My biggest concern with Social Security right now is, as an employer, we see both sides paying out as an employer to the Social Security tax and also see the employee payout. And our biggest concern would be that taxes would increase, and that would have a negative impact on us as a small business.
Yeah, so he's hearing what Fidel just said. He's been studying the issue. He sees there's a cash deficiency, and he figures rightly that in order to make up for the cash deficiency, if we wait long, one of the options is going to be to run up his payroll tax, which not only affects the worker, but it affects the employer, particularly the small business owner. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. It affects us, and I believe that with the Social Security growth potential that an employee would have, it would complement any 401k or any other investment opportunities that they would have.
Yeah.
And have a positive impact on.
It's, we hear from small business owners on this issue. It's a pretty healthy chunk to put their part of the payroll tax, pay the payroll tax for a small business. 10 employees, guys making a good living, but taxes coming out, and it's a big significant part of their contribution into the tax to the kitty. And so I hear from small business owners saying, don't you think you better fix this thing now before it's too late, just to make sure the contributions I made, the hard work that we've all done together, and we put it into the plan, doesn't just go out the window? Isn't that right?
Yes,
I'm leading the witness here.
Yes, it is.
Not even a lawyer. Well, I appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Honored you're here. Good luck in your business.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a risk taker and an entrepreneur. By the way, let me say something about entrepreneurs. I'm violating the Laura rule. I'm talking too much. But think salient points are, I know they keep popping in my head. We'll find out how salient they are. In order for the entrepreneurial spirit to remain strong in America, public policy must encourage more savings. The more people save, the more capital is available. The more capital available, the more investment is available. And the more investment available, the more growth there will be. The more growth there will be, the more jobs there will be. The idea of encouraging personal savings accounts will make more capital available to a system, and the entrepreneurial spirit will be stronger, not weaker. And that's another benefit of encouraging personal accounts. You ready? Our final participant, Terry Walter.
Yes,
That's you.
that's my name.
Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
She has the hardest job in America, being a single mom.
Single mother.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Single mother to whom?
His name's Colin. He's 3. He'll be 4 next month.
Great. It's better than being 2, I guess, isn't it?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Well, just wait for teenagers. You are concerned about Social Security.
I am. I will graduate next month with my master's degree as a physician assistant.
Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Prior to going to school, I did contribute to a 401k with my employer, and
Yeah.
I do like the idea of the personal accounts for Social Security to ensure that there is a system, not only for myself, but for my son in the future. And the ownership over the accounts is very empowering to individuals, and it also gives you another asset to leave to your family when you're gone.
That's the spirit of personal accounts. That's the spirit of a single mom saying, can government make it easier for me to do my duty? Not only to make sure that I can survive in the older years, but also will I have an asset to pass on to Colin? That's really what it's all about, isn't it? Encouraging ownership and assets to pass on from one generation to the next. Let me ask you something, 401k. People know, of course, what that is, right? 401k, it's a common term now. Everybody understands what a 401k is. That wasn't always the case. It wasn't all that long ago that you said 401k and people thought you were talking numbers and one letter out of the alphabet, and that's all it meant. Let me ask you something. When you first got your 401k, was it hard to invest?
No, not a lot. There's a lot of guidance in it. You're given options between stocks and bonds, and it's made very clear at the setup at the beginning and very little to do after that.
You see, that's really important for people to understand. You hear this, oh, maybe it's too hard for some in our society to invest. That's kind of the old attitude that only a certain kind of person can invest. Maybe it's too difficult. It's not too difficult. Matter of fact, it's made quite easy.
Yes, it is.
And you get quarterly statements?
Absolutely. So you can follow it. That's the empowering part. You can see what you're doing with your money.
Yeah, how about that? Don't we want that throughout all society, the idea of people opening a quarterly statement? I can think of a couple of positive things when somebody opens up their own statement and says, I want to see how my assets are doing. One is it'll cause you to pay attention to what government's doing. All of a sudden, tax policy, spending policy, debt policy, all of a sudden makes a lot more sense to you if the effects of government affect your asset base. Secondly, I think it makes a lot of sense for people just to watch things grow. And we want that extended throughout our society. I love the idea of Terry Walter saying to the president, I'm comfortable about making investments. And that's what planners and policymakers in Washington must understand. This is an empowering idea. This enriches a person's life. This is the way to make the system work better for Terry Walter, who's got the hardest job in America, raising her son Colin. And she just said in camera, I'm not worried about making the investments. They make it quite simple. But what she doesn't want, I presume, is her money not earning the rate of return that she can get, like she's getting in her 401k.
Exactly.
Yeah, see, there we go. I hope people are listening carefully to this discussion and the dialogue that's taking place. We got people from all aspects of our society sitting here on stage saying to those of us who've been charged with the responsibility of taking on tough problems, get after it now before it's too late. And people are saying, trust us with our own money. give us a chance to build up our own assets, earn a better rate of return, so that when it comes time for younger Americans to retire, the retirement system works better for them. The safety net works for our seniors. The safety net is in place for those who are receiving a check today. You have nothing to worry about. There's a hole in the safety net for a generation to come, and our charge and our duty is to mend that hole in the safety net so that the American people will say, job well done, you did what we expect you to do, and reform Social Security for generations to come. Thanks for coming. God bless.